Hello, welcome to Search with Sean Live, and thanks if you're watching this actually live on LinkedIn or YouTube. But if you've got things to do throughout the day, you can catch up on YouTube, so you can always catch it there. And yeah, I'm gonna stop talking so much because I actually want to hear from our guest, and we've not got much time. This will be for like an hour. So yeah, firstly, I want to thank the team at Reflect Digital. Really appreciate their time. These are some experts they have on all the different digital marketing subjects. So really appreciate your time. And I'll do a quick introduction on who Reflect are, and then our guests will talk through who they are and what they do there. And then we get on to some great topics around digital marketing and what's trending, what the hot topics are, and we'll go from there, I guess. So yeah, Reflect Digital is a performance marketing agency that helps global brands and e-commerce businesses leverage human insights and psychological nudges to optimize their strategies. By understanding audience motivations and intent, the agency ensures marketing budgets are invested in the right channels at the right time to drive revenue and attract ready-to-buy users. So, yeah, thank you once again. I'll go around the room and just get a quick intro if you can on who you are and what you do at Reflect. That'd be awesome. So, Gary, start with you, please.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks for having me. So, I'm Gary, been in paid media for 7 years. My role is focused around strategy and innovation, not quite in the same way that Matt's is, but it's more about the implementation with our clients. Although it's centralized around strategy and innovation, I do have a passion for training junior members of the industry, helping to kind of build their careers and succeed in themselves. So that's one of the big things that I look into. I've worked across a lot of platforms, so Google Ads, Meta Ads, Amazon, LinkedIn, so on and so forth. A lot of large clients, a lot of smaller clients, and of course, each of those come with their own challenges. But yeah, really excited to be here, and thanks for having me.
Awesome, Matt.
Yep. Hi, I'm Matt. I'm the Innovation and Automation Lead at Reflect Digital, and I use sort of my time to try and make other people's time more effective. So looking at the way that we do things, the sort of operational efficiency that sort of often incorporates stuff like AI and basic automation to try and make things better, but also to improve the experience for clients and the deliverables that they can get out of it as well.
Awesome. Carl, over to you.
I'm Carl. Thank you for having us. I'm the SEO Director at Reflect, and for the past 20 or so years I've been working in digital marketing, just helping businesses achieve their organic business growth goals. Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, awesome. So I will keep my talking to a minimum. So I'll just chuck out the first sort of question. And so with rising cost and platform diversification, how should businesses adapt their aligned search strategies to maintain effective audience engagement? So I don't know who wants to take this one on first.
I think we've all probably got something to say about this, to be honest. So obviously cost for any business is a key concern at the moment. And there are lots and lots and lots of different places that you can spend your money. So I think one of the key bits is to understand who your audience are and quote unquote where they live. So what do they actually do? What motivates them? And what's physically going to work best for you? So then you can concentrate on that platform, concentrate on motivating your customers to do what you want them to, and then scale that up.
Definitely. And I think it's a similar thing from my perspective. It's understanding where your audience is and sort of meeting them there, but also trying to break down where they've come from and where they're going, and sort of really breaking that initial concept of the funnel where you're in this stage or you're in this stage, and actually appreciating that a modern digital experience is a messy middle, as Google calls it. It's constantly going backwards and forwards between different sources, different platforms. So any tracking that you can do there is really important. But also when we come to talk about cost, I think there's an element of that where it maybe misses the point slightly, where we need to actually look at the opportunity cost of not investing in the right areas and seeing where the value is. Because if that initial motivation to reduce the amount that we're spending on tools, platforms, particular strategies, actually leads us down the wrong path, we actually might want to look at investing in new areas where maybe audience behavior has shifted, or platform diversification means that we need to spread our bets more than we ever have before. So yeah, it's that opportunity cost is really important as well.
I think the guys have covered it really well, but to kind of echo on, or at least expand upon what Carl was saying, I think looking into audience insights is obviously a massive thing. And I think when we start to consider the size of businesses, so for example, a smaller business, for instance, they don't really have the funds to be able to say, hey, do you know what? Let's test Meta, let's test Google, let's test Microsoft, let's test LinkedIn, put 1,000 here, 2,000 here, 3,000 there. It's just never going to work. So if you can understand your audience as best as possible, and then understand, great, okay, let's look at platform capabilities. Can I do that on LinkedIn? Can I reach that audience on Google Ads? How do I do that? And then obviously make informed decisions based on all of this data collection to ensure that we're going down the right avenue. That in itself helps with the cost issue, because of course you're not wasting money kind of flaying around and testing across various channels, but it's more about just getting that centralized focus down a particular audience avenue and then coupling that with a platform, really.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that people are afraid of doing is they're afraid of failing. Failing's not a problem. You just have to fail fast. And you need to understand why you failed. So Matt's obviously mentioned about tracking. Gary's obviously mentioned about testing different audiences, or your inability to test a particular platform because of funding. So it's understanding, okay, well, what do I want these people to do, right? And are they going to do it or not, right? So if I understand the audience, that's one part of the equation. Right? Understanding what I want them to do, it's the second part. But then understanding why they're not doing it. So sometimes people will go out to a particular platform. We hear it quite a lot. It doesn't work for me, that platform. It doesn't work, right? Well, why doesn't it work? Is it because the landing page experience that you're giving someone's particularly poor? Is it because your copy's wrong, right? Is it because you haven't really understood your audience, you just thought you did? Is it because your mate in the pub told you that didn't actually work for you, right? All of those things play a part. So understanding why something doesn't work is almost as important as why it does. And then being able to react to that and actually change so that you actually know, okay, this audience lives in this place. I've put this campaign together. It didn't work. Why didn't it work? Let's refine it. Let's make it work. All right, let's get the most ROI that we possibly can out of every single thing that we're doing, and then learn and use those learnings moving forward.
Yeah, really great points. And yeah, I've had an experience before where, because it didn't work for a certain, campaign, it's like, oh, that isn't for us anymore. But it all depends, like you say, on the campaign and how it's executed and so on and so forth. So it really does vary, and you can't just write off those kind of things. So yeah, really, really great points. And just I can see we're live on. I've been trying to cover this, but I can see we're on LinkedIn. I don't know about YouTube, to be honest. It should be there, but I can't find it. But anyway, it will be on YouTube if you're. It'll be put on there anyway. However, I can get it on there, so don't worry about that. So yeah, we'll move on to the next point, because I want to get as many covered as possible. So in what ways are AI and voice search technologies reshaping SEO practices, and how can companies optimize their content for these advancements? Obviously, we know like AI overviews and large language models like ChatGPT and stuff. So yeah, who wants to cover this first?
I can kick this one off. Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about voice search for a decade now, probably. It's going to change everything. It's going to change the world, and just hasn't yet. I mean, Amazon alone must have spent billions of dollars trying to get Alexa to be the next big thing, and 90% of people are using it as an egg timer and a weather checker. So it's a failure to understand that user behavior, I think, is really the key thing when it comes to voice search specifically. But there are a couple of big changes, obviously, with LLMs that mean the failures we've seen in the past might not be the same in the future. So we've seen Apple Intelligence coming to Siri, where she might actually work in the future and be able to understand what you want and not just fail. And the Gemini voice assistant as well. And both of those things, yes, are improvements, and I think they could have a big impact in their particular niche. But there is still that fundamental sort of multimodal concern of, are you actually going to get people to speak into a voice assistant? Is that too much of a faff? Are people too used to doing things in a particular way? People who've grown up with Google are going to prefer typing. People who are on a train aren't going to want to speak out loud into a microphone to try and get it to do something else. So yeah, I think the change that we'll see is probably going to be quite niche and small impact, but where it does have an impact, we definitely will see quite a big shift, I think. And the AI overviews from Google is a perfect example, because it's almost taking away a huge chunk of traffic from sites that were looking at that top level, very high search volume, very low intent term, something like, when did England win the World Cup? That's an advertising sort of strategy there, because you're trying to get as much traffic through there, run ads on your site and use that as your platform. But if that's answered in the search engine, your entire business model goes out the window. So they're the kind of niche areas that I think you need to be concerned about. But for anyone who's providing a particular service or a product or something of value to their users, I don't think it's going to be a big shift anytime soon.
I also think that one of the things that we really need to consider is, if AI is basically a giant crawler that then processes lots and lots of information and it drags it into a platform. One of the things that we've kind of learned from lots and lots of different platforms, including all of the Facebook, Instagram platforms, is people don't like leaving them, like exhibiting their behaviors within that platform. So it's quite likely that if you have gone out and spent a lot of your marketing budget creating copy, expanding into long tail key phrases, that it works. But I also think that one of the problems that it creates is, if it's dragging that information into ChatGPT, Gemini, or the latest AI that's just been developed, what are you going to get someone to do? What do they do as a result? Right. So if my informational query is answered within that platform, I'm no longer in control of the user experience, because all that information has been dragged into another platform, and it's unlikely that the user is going to go through and actually exit it to go and find you. And what you find with a lot of the kind of the query strings or the prompting that people do is, it doesn't necessarily return a link. So it's going to drag that information in. It's going to answer the question for you that you've asked, or it's going to write the piece of information or create for you. But then where do they go? So it's a big drain on a lot of those informational queries. So your voice query has always been, let's write a lot of content that is longer tail keywords. Let's answer lots of questions. Let's get into the conversation with people. It's kind of been replaced by a lot of the search overviews. And then you've got a secondary hit, which is a lot of that information is now provided in an AI search to someone. And there are lots and lots and lots of people using them, but how do we get hold of them? I think it's going to provide a really interesting challenge for the next kind of 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, being paid media director, I don't think I'll be able to give as good an answer as Carl or Matt, but I think I can talk about it from a paid media perspective. So I can give you kind of a real life example. One thing that we have seen more recently with one of our clients within our campaigns is that there's been an uptick in people searching for, like, how much does a particular product cost? So it's like, great, okay. So what we've done is we've created and tailored specific landing pages, or at least we've asked the client to do so. They've done that, and we're seeing some great uptick. We're getting some good attribution to our campaigns. We're kind of surfacing, or at least an issue is being surfaced, and we're proactively tackling it with a specific and unique campaign that's targeted towards it. Now, of course, if all of these issues are therefore answered by Gemini, for example, how are we actually going to ensure that we're collecting this data from a paid media perspective? Will this impact our campaigns? Will ultimately the full attribution that we get from a year-on-year perspective look dramatically different? So let's say, for instance, we get 500 conversions one year. Suddenly we're seeing 400. What actually is that down to? And then is it just a case of, great, yeah, they've been lost to the void of Gemini? We don't know. So I think I can't quite expand on from a paid media point of view. I think that's where we should be looking. Where is it going to take from our campaigns? I think also from voice search, kind of holistically, not just voice search from Google Ads. I think this opens up the considerations of additional channels that people could look into. So, for example, connected TV. We know that people are starting to search more on, Netflix or Disney Plus, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's about, okay, because this is a thing and perhaps this is going to be adopted as we move forward throughout the years, should we therefore be looking as agencies to educate our clients on the potential of connected TV, so on and so forth?
Yeah, those great points, and this is what I try and say when I do these sort of videos, is that people are finding all new ways to search for things now. You've got obviously watches and glasses and TVs and everything that people are finding information through now. So yeah, really interesting. And in terms of a bit off topic, but Gary, in a sense of like paid, obviously there's been a lot of studies out recently that when AI views have come along, obviously that it's affected organic click-through rates, but also paid cost. Obviously that was something that was kind of rising anyway to a degree, but have you seen the sort of like AI views sort of increase that further, or what do you think?
It's quite a tough one, really. Now, I don't know what I can say on this without trying to upset Google, but Google every year for particular industries will increase costs. Just kind of your ad rank thresholds and various things will be changed year on year. So, for example, I think it was in September they increased costs of various industries by 12.5%, around that number. So, because there's ever-changing variables in the market, it's very difficult to understand as to whether one particular thing is creating this particular change from the bottom line. I think it's definitely something to look out for. I would imagine that what could be created by it is where, let's say, for example, we've got a lot of these question-based queries. Because a lot of this may be picked up by Gemini, then therefore the available audience for paid media may be restricted, but the competition is going to remain the same. So what this could ultimately mean that therefore it becomes a more competitive marketplace for the traffic that's available from that front, and therefore CPCs may rise. People may be willing to pay a little bit more. But yeah, that's what I would say about that.
Yeah,
Sorry, I also think one of the things that we need to do as marketeers is we really, really need to concentrate on what's the best search result or what's the best search medium. So one of the things that I read fairly recently was that when you go onto Google and you go, all right, things to do in X town, all right, Google provides you with quite a boring text link, and you click on it and you go to someone's website and you have a look around and you read like 800, 900, 2,000 words on the things that you can do in London, right? And then the comparative between that is that you go onto something like TikTok or Instagram and you go things to do. And it gives you this really, really kind of vibrant, exciting experience that tells you, like, here are all the things that you can really do. And the kind of the tone of the video and the way that it's filmed and the excitement that you feel from that actually gets you quite motivated to go out and really want to go and do some nice things in London. And it's a really interesting way to explore. I think very often when we put ourselves in the we are SEO or we are digital marketers, we go for a lot of the traditional channels. And actually what happens is we're not, again, thinking about what the best experience for your customer is, because search is changing. It's one of the things that's kept me involved in it for 20 years. It literally 1 year to the next, it's never the same. It's an ever evolving thing. And it's search engine optimization, right? It's not Google optimization. So we need to have a look outside of that box and say, right, okay, well, if I've got a customer that does this, what's the best for them? What are they going to want to see? What's going to get them excited? You know, what's really, really going to motivate someone to go and click on my stuff, like to go and engage with it? And if you start generating that user engagement, it's absolutely brilliant, both from a marketing point of view and a business point of view. It keeps things exciting.
Yeah, 100%, and that's something I've been trying to get through myself and the channel, definitely. And also, it's not all one shoe fits all sort of situation either, because if you have depends on what website you have, but for example, at Macmillan, we have our clinical information, and obviously people would prefer that in a certain format that's professional and obviously shows all those trust signals and that. But then we also have Mighty Hike. So you might want to go on a TikTok or Instagram and see actually people doing it and that kind of thing. So it really does vary. But yeah, 100%. Yeah, agree with that. And just on before we move on, Carl, in terms of like the content side of it and trying to obviously accommodate for artificial intelligence and, voice and stuff, are you kind of directing people to change the way they do their copy or adding more structured data there? Or is it kind of carry on the way it is and see how things play out?
I don't think it's ever carry on how it is. I think you've got to evolve as you move. One of my things is that I always think Google kind of tries the carrot first, and a lot of the other platforms do. So if I give you an example, for quite a few years, we did FAQ schema. They appeared in the search results. It was all great. Everyone was quite happy. And it kind of motivated people to go and start marking up FAQs, right? But the real answer was, I want a better search experience. I actually want people to be able to arrive on a page and have their questions answered so that they don't lose out and so that the journey can continue. And then suddenly FAQ schema disappears and it's not in the search results, and you don't get that extra kind of bit of search real estate. But does that mean that we should stop doing it? Because I think the answer to that is you've already been told what people want. You've been rewarded for it for a while, right? And just because the reward goes away doesn't change that user's behavior. It really, really means that what I should have been doing all along is putting FAQ schema onto my pages, and I needed it, and the powers that be decided that not enough people were doing it, so they kind of needed a nudge in the right direction. Yeah. So when we're looking at these things, they're all tools. They're all tools to make things better. So can you use them? Yes. Should you use them? Yes. Should you be looking out for new tools? Absolutely. Right. And if you need new tools, you need a map. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a great way of actually putting it across. That's perfect. And on that point, and I shout this out nearly every time I do a video, but Mark Williams Cook, and he has the thing on Spotify around patterns and Google patterns, and although they may not always go through with these patterns or whatever, it does give you a mindset of what Google are trying to get to and what their mindset might be, and that kind of thing. So it's always interesting to look into. So yeah, just shout out to that again. And this next point is more about your internal workings, I guess, without giving out too many trade secrets. But in terms of like, how do you balance automation and human expertise with when delivering results to clients? Obviously, we got all these sort of additional tools, automation, AI tools or whatever. How do we balance between making sure we're delivering the best results to clients in an efficient, speedy manner?
Yeah, I think the key element to consider there is finding the right application of it. So automation is good for specific things, but it can be harmful in other places. And it's that the finding of the opportunities that is really key. So the way that we look at it internally is we try and find tasks that are making people sad, that are slow, or that are simple, but actually take up quite a lot of time. And we sort of categorize and we build these frameworks to almost break down what's important in the way that we work and the way that we do things, and what are the things that are maybe less important for someone who is an expert to be doing. And it's not so much about replacing particular roles or particular things that we do. It's about freeing up that time for the expert to be an expert and not just be that sort of grunt worker that quite often we find very, very, very expert people spending their time doing very simple things. So that's where we look for the automation. But I think as much as we're looking for those opportunities, we're also looking deliberately at places where we don't want to use it. So anything that needs nuance or a lot of creativity or has a level of complexity to it, that's something that we would want a human involved in more than we would want to automate. And especially when we look at the automations as well, we don't want to completely remove that human element, especially if they're an expert. We want to involve it early. So being part of the design of the system, making sure that we're not sort of siloing away a department of people who are doing all the automations, and actually we're talking to the people who do that role, who do that thing every single day, who know more about the industry than maybe the people creating the tool are, and just involve that expertise in the creation of the automation. And then also making sure you've got that human check, that final review at the end of any automation to be able to go, no, that's wrong, because AI systems, as good as they are, they're not going to be as good at detecting those subtleties and that nuance as an expert in their role. It's also worth pointing out when we're talking about expertise is AI is not an expert. AI is a parrot. So if you're building in an AI system into your automations and your tools, it's fundamental rule: don't trust it until you can prove that it's right. There are loads of improvements that we've seen in terms of what these tools are offering in terms of their structure and the way that they produce their responses. So retrieval augmented generation, using knowledge graphs, vector databases, all of these things are techniques to try and back up and prove what is being spat out of the LLM. We've also seen ChatGPT 4.5 come out recently with a much lower hallucination rate than previous models. But it's still very much, we need to start from the perspective of, I don't trust you until I can prove that you're correct. So yeah, that's the key element there. I think when we talk about delivering results for clients at the end of those things, that's maybe different than when we're doing something internally. And I like to think of it as being adaptive automation. There are loads of opportunities and loads of agencies that do cookie cutter templates, and they'll run a check the same way for every different client and kick out something at the end and spend 500 quid on it or whatever. That's not where we want to be as experts in the industry and also as partners to our clients. We want to make sure that even if we are doing automation, that it's adaptive to the needs, the requirements, the understanding of the industry, understanding of the audience, and being able to create something that is truly valuable for the clients rather than something that we can do quickly and get a small amount of reward for. But yeah.
Just to echo some of those points, I think one of the key bits is, I don't know if any of you saw the news, like Goldman Sachs have just fairly recently announced that they're going to let close to 300 million jobs go over the next 3 years. So they're integrating a new AI system. Okay, my thoughts on that are, don't kill your future experts. Okay, at the end of the day, Matt's mentioned it, AI is going to spit out the answers to the questions based on whatever research you feed it. So I think anybody who learned computer science basic at GCSE went down the GIGO route, garbage in, garbage out. So you need the experts to feed it in the first place. So for me, AI is about making your experts better, right? It goes a long way towards what Matt was saying with regard to, let's give them the time to be experts, right? So if I need data in a particular format in order to make a judgment based on that data, getting the data and processing it and putting it in front of me, really, really sensible use of AI, right? Asking it to make my commentary, less so, right? And it might be brilliant at 9 times out of 10, but what about the 10th time? What if that's £1 million deal that you've put on the table for someone, and only once it loses someone £1 million, right? For me, it doesn't really work. We've got to have a lot of trust in it. We've got to be able to understand where that expertise is coming from. We've got to understand whether it's actually got biased information. So there's loads of work on AI where they tried to use it in policing and found out it was actually racist, right? Because of some of the information that was being fed into it. Now, if you can, it's not to say that AI is bad. AI is just spitting out what you gave it. Right? It's a really, 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 really useful tool, and it's really good at making people more efficient. But does it replace a person? I don't think so.
Yeah, I think I could just expand on those points a bit. So let's take a real life scenario. Let's use a PMAX campaign, or maybe broad match within our Google Ads accounts as a little bit of an example. So when we look at broad match, obviously there's this really big thing about getting it into every single account. Oh, we need to use it. We need to make sure that we're, expanding to the greatest audience possible. But there's so many considerations around signals that we with our human expertise, need to be able to provide broad match, need to be able to provide P-match, for example, whether this is search themes, whether this is audiences, first-party data. But going back to broad match, now, when we look at decision-making of, let's say, which match type we're going to be using across campaigns, when we choose broad match, there's actually 4 unique signals that exact matches and phrase matches don't use. So if we just throw a broad match in and say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. AI, let's just work with this and see what we get, it's never going to work. Broad match will actually use things such as the landing pages. So we, as experts ourselves, have to define and choose these landing pages. We are the ones that create, not necessarily us, but we are the ones that create them. We are the ones that choose them. We are the ones that applicate them and apply them to the campaigns, right? Other keywords in the ad group, for example, if we don't, for instance, put the correct exact match keywords within an ad group that is using broad match, then it's not going to learn from what's existing within the ad group, and therefore it may not deliver the best results possible. Also, previous searches, if we're not using conversion-focused bidding strategies alongside a broad match, for instance, then of course it's not going to understand a little bit more about the previous searches of a user, and therefore it may find somebody that perhaps isn't the right customer for you. And also user location. So all of these different signals are things that, of course, the AI is providing, but in essence, we're actually providing ourselves as well. So I think that's where the balance is. Using ourselves, again, it's just echoing a lot of what Carl said, but ensuring that we're providing the right information, again, whether this is first party, third party, whatever we can actually collect, plugging it into the system and allowing it to run and collect the best results. Of course, there's an element of testing with it as well. So this isn't just me saying, hey, grab the best data you've got, throw it into the system and see what happens. It's more about assessing it maybe after a week, tweaking where you need to, collecting a different data set, using that, repurposing, developing, and so on.
I also think one of the things that you encounter quite a lot with AI, right, is that there's a lot of kind of case studies in terms of this is what AI can do, right? And I think there's a real perception that actually what I can do is I can sit in ChatGPT and I can do all this stuff, right? Now, me, I can do it, right? Now, at Reflect, we're very, very lucky, right? We've got Matt. He spent a long time actually refining the skills that he's got around AI, right? You can actually go out and build a lot of this stuff. We've also got an entire department called Lab, right? Basically, they have a guy called Andre who builds like large language models, right? So we're very lucky, but it's not in everyone's skill set. And I think one of the other things is that in terms of education, a lot of the C-suite sit there and they go, oh yeah, you can do that with AI. Let's go and replace everyone now, right? Whereas the actual reality is that there might be, a couple of hundred, couple of thousand people in the UK that can actually do that, right? There might be a couple of hundred, couple of thousand people who can do that in the US, right? And then beyond that, what you're really talking about is experimentation and spending a lot of money to get something built. And it doesn't necessarily do the same job as the person. So what are you going to do in the meantime?
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, yeah, valid points. And just to touch upon a few of those points is that, I've built models on ChatGPT, but they can quite quickly break. So if you don't have those, backup plans, then you're kind of screwed in that sense. So you can't put all your eggs into one basket. And also it's all down to the prompting, like you said, Carl. Like it's not an easy thing to do. People just think, oh, it's just like, chuck it in the ChatGPT, but it's all down to the prompts and taking time to actually put that together and play with it and see what works and what it spits out and refine it and so on and so forth. So it's not just like AI will just do this. The companies, Klarna, I think, they did that last year and they got rid of loads of people. I think now they're starting to see issues with that action they took last year. So yeah, that's a good case study to look at. In terms of like the next one, is very, very kind of topical thing and one I'm personally interested in. So how do you approach that client education and approach their concerns when it comes to emerging trends like AI overviews or AI in general? evolving PPC strategies and automation, like, you know, because people who aren't directly involved do kind of read about these things on, you know, wherever it is, even BBC or search engine journal newsletters or whatever, and they get worried. They start, I guess you probably see it, whatever, they start emailing you, oh my god, what does this mean? So yeah, how do you approach that?
I think we could break it down into a few answers, really, because there are so many different ways that we could look at it. But I think really starting off with simplifying the complexities of it. I think, for instance, we've got to take into consideration, just on Carl's thing, not everybody is Matt, you know, so Matt may understand everything about the AI, and he's absolutely brilliant. I was hearing a talk just about generative AI yesterday that he delivered to one of our clients, and me and myself in those 15 minutes just picked up a world of information. But we've got to take into considerations that our clients don't know all of this. So breaking down the complexities of it, whether that's layman's terms or whatever, you know, speaking to people as humans, maybe not as always experts, because yes, we're all in the field of marketing, but we all have different specialisms. I think that's quite important to consider. But yeah, you know, clients do definitely worry about losing control. I think we've had a lot of, through a lot of our accounts, we've had a lot of, oh no, I don't quite want to do PMAX. Oh, I don't quite want to adopt this particular bidding strategy. Oh, we're not going to be able to control it. But I think it's about kind of addressing these concerns by through setting clear guardrails. So for instance, let's say keeping a portion of that in-house. So where we were speaking about earlier to do with creative. So we wouldn't necessarily say, hey, AI, you know, can you do all of our creative? Can you do all of our ad copy? So keeping that kind of human oversight in key areas like ad copy, as I just mentioned. I think us ourselves, obviously at Reflect Digital, we have a massive behavioral kind of focus. So we wouldn't really ever go out to AI to look to write our ad copy for us. We like to use a lot of kind of behavioral tests, whether this is the endowment effect, social proofing, so on and so forth, to elicit behaviors from particular audiences, of course. So there are certain guardrails that we would put in place and certain areas that we would just never kind of push to AI, or at least we would build the comfort with the client that, hey, we're going to still be doing this. I also think maybe it's quite a simple one, but showing the great work that can come from adoption of AI. You know, we've got a range of case studies through various clients where we've perhaps adopted PMAX to grow a certain client in the US. We had a client recently that we were looking at a seasonal strategy for how we can sell their hedging. Maybe that's giving something away who they are, but the point is we adopted PMAX and we structured it in a particular way so we can use the AI to adjust towards the seasonality. We've even used AI for programmatic. So again, for the same client, understanding a little bit about the AI picking up on the weather signals and then understanding how to serve and what messaging to be able to use. We're still crafting the messaging, but the AI is just matching the signals and matching, you know, the weather reports to actually our accounts and then serving the ads that we've written. So yeah, a lot of ways that we could tackle it. There's just a few.
Yeah, and I think we've sort of touched on it in a couple of the answers, but it's about killing that hype and that sort of buzzwordiness in your relationship with that client and being able to come back to sort of treating it as a tool. It is one part of an arsenal. Yes, it's something that is obviously hugely popular in terms of that pop culture understanding of what AI is. I mean, we saw it in sort of the New York stock market where people started renaming tools that they'd already built to something AI, and the investment and stock price would shoot up because it's got AI in the name, and there are people investing by searching for AI and investing in whatever is coming up. So it's that element of hype that we've definitely seen from especially clients who have investors or C-suites who are maybe less technically minded in terms of what that actually means for their business. And it's about looking at it more from the perspective of what are the same conditions that we would put on anything else as an investment strategy or a technique, and applying it in a real world use case. So there's definitely an element around sort of that initial client education, but then it's about how do you clarify the size of the prize as well. We've talked to certain clients recently about the changing in sort of user behavior and search behavior and what that means for their business model. And obviously there's that huge fear of everything's changing, it's all going to completely fall down, the house of cards is already gone. But when we looked at the data we realized maybe 1% of their business was being affected at an absolute maximum. And even then, it wasn't necessarily being affected negatively. It was just shifting behavior. There was no real impact to the core of their business. So the size of the prize in terms of overall investment there, but also the cost of the choice is, if you're spending loads of time and effort and even just having loads of meetings about AI internally, what is the cost of doing that and cost of making that choice to invest there, as opposed to going somewhere else and going, actually, we know this works, or we know this needs to be improved to deliver better results. And can we get more there than we ever could by trying to implement AI because we feel like we should, which I think a lot of clients definitely feel that pressure. And we also need to speak in their language as well when we do that, is the KPIs that we talk about with everything else, the focusing on revenue and the things that client specifically cares about. It's the same with AI. We need to make sure that we're tying it back to not we can do this with AI, it's this is why we should do this with AI, and this is the output that's expected to have. For example, I mentioned it earlier, but the kind of clients who are trying to produce content maybe that is answering basic top-line questions, that's where we would want to make those decisions around, okay, that's no longer a valid business model for the long term, so we need to start adapting quickly because AI overviews in Google is killing that. And so there's the element, I think, of speaking in a language that, yes, they understand and they care about, but being willing to challenge things and be slightly confrontational with certain clients who are maybe super attached to either the old way of doing things or want to jump straight to the new way of doing things. I think there's a measured pace that we need to take instead.
I just want to touch on the education bit. So one of the things with all agencies or people that are doing marketing of any kind is that's your job, that's your passion. So you're going to sit there and you're going to go out and you probably heavily going to research it. If you want to be good at your job, you've got to understand it. You've got to kind of read around the subject. So 9 times out of 10, you're going to be one of the most knowledgeable people in the room when you're talking to somebody else because you've read about it. So the temptation is then to just deluge your customers with, this is all the information that I've just spent 6 months reading about. Here you go, boom. But it basically boils down to a sales pitch. It's what are the features of it, what are the facts, and what are the benefits it can bring you, right? Because ultimately it's a business conversation, right? I don't need to know that it can write 2,000 words in under a second. I need to know what the benefit of that is to my business and whether it's actually going to change anything. I don't need to know that it can cluster lots and lots of pieces of information. I need to know how that's going to affect my business and what the value of being able to do that is. And I think sometimes the conversations that we have are, this is what you could do, this is what you could do, this is what you could do. Whereas the reality is, this is what you should do, and this is why.
Yeah, spot on as usual. Yeah, great stuff. I guess obviously moving on, like we've got 15 minutes or so, so hopefully we get a couple more points across. We've got a couple more, so yeah, it's cool. We should be able to get through them. So in terms of like what key metrics should agencies focus on in the remainder of 2025 to prove return on investment to clients, and how do you measure success beyond traffic and conversions? Obviously you've got your own separate areas, but yeah, who wants to kick that off?
So firstly, shameless plug, Becky, our CEO, did a talk at Brighton SEO last year pretty much about this, right? And I think we when we're marketeers, we lock on to, okay, what is a conversion? What am I going to go and take forward, right? How do I actually prove ROI? There's a stage before that. And the stage before it is really, really simplistic. It is, what does the business care about? Because if a business cares about money, right, and you're monitoring the wrong thing, it doesn't matter. If they care about newsletter sign-ups and you're monitoring something else, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I used to work in a newspaper group, 20s, quite a while ago, And one of the things that they cared about was traffic. Genuinely, that was all they cared about, particularly traffic in regard to football. And they used to push really, really heavily all the articles on football to get traffic to those pages. And the main reason was they made all of their money from advertising around those football articles. It was like 80% of their revenue was around football articles. So I could talk to them about traffic. I could talk to them about how many people filled out a comment. I could talk to them about how many people subscribed to the newspaper. And being honest, they just didn't care. And so every business is different. It's not just about trying to find out how much is money, how much is newsletter sign up. It's understanding that business at its core and what's actually going to move the needle for that business. And then being able to measure that metric then allows you to talk on a level that a lot of people don't, because I can talk to you as a business, as an individual. So to coin Matt's phrase, I'm not using a cookie cutter anymore. What I'm actually doing is I'm tailoring metrics to your business, right? I'm understanding what makes your business tick. And then I'm trying to create a campaign that actually makes that work for you. So if you want a particular outcome and I understand what that particular outcome is, I can design a strategy that actually delivers that outcome for you. And then it makes a difference. And then we can start talking to you about ROI, and we can start talking to you about how much something costs and how many things it delivered or how many widgets it delivered. But I know then, right, that actually the widgets that I delivered were actually important to you. Yeah.
Definitely. I'd go ahead if you want to, Gary. But I think certainly from the SEO work that I've done in the past, I think there's a lot of finding what the audience that you're trying to talk to cares about, and then working out whether the client that you're working with actually knows that and actually understands that, and cares about the right thing. Carl mentioned, obviously, they might care about one particular area, but there are definitely clients who misunderstand what they should be focusing on. So it's partly an education piece there about what is valuable to the client and what does the client think is valuable to them. Maybe there's a dichotomy there between the two. I think in terms of a specific one to look for, one of these is definitely pixel depth, because obviously we know that the SERPs are changing. The face of the old sort of 10 blue links idea is gone. And I think a lot of marketers are sort of being dragged kicking and screaming away from that. I'm ranking position 1. That may not actually matter anymore, because depending on the query that you're searching for, depending on what appears in the featured snippets or the AI overviews or FAQs above you, people also ask, all of these kinds of things are starting to really change the way that we understand how we can measure success on the SERPs. And so pixel depth is one of those things that is consistent and descriptive, because it doesn't matter what happens to the page, that pixel depth is going to be relatively consistent. Obviously, there's going to be variations in terms of if we have 12K monitors in the next couple of years, that might change. But we can adapt to that in a much easier way than we ever could to sort of the completely automated algorithmic changes that we're seeing on a 15-minute basis on the same SERP. So there's huge change there. So trying to find things that are consistent and descriptive and meaningful within that space is quite valuable. And I think fundamentally we need to measure success in a way that is built with context. And I think that's lacking in a lot of the ways that we understand consumer performance and also client performance. So if you're down year on year, loads of clients will get really stressed about that whole thing. But if you're down 4% and your actual competitive set is down 120%, all of a sudden doesn't look so bad. And actually that industry trend, that wider influence of the dynamic markets that we're seeing from both an economic perspective with cost of living crises and all those things, but also the wider economic shifts that we're seeing, especially with recent US introductions of tariffs and trade wars. Everything is going to get more complex in terms of how different businesses are affected by these things. So understanding who those competitors are, finding a competitive set within your market, in your industry, and comparing yourself relative to those things is much more valuable in terms of measuring success overall. I used to work for a publishing company, and this was the story of success being found in failure, because we knew that digital was definitely the way to go. Print magazines were dying a death. And so on plenty of calls, we would have a big green arrow next to the negative numbers because we're like, we only declined by 10% this year. And that became a success story because it was in the face of these wider trends and this wider impact on our business. So yeah, I think that's a really key element for me.
Yeah, I think metrics are a really interesting one, because let's think about it this way. You know, obviously it does depend on the client goal. When you look at a metric specifically, we need to really be understanding why we're focusing on that metric. So let's take click-through rate, for example. You know, we may have some ads running on Google Ads. We've got a generic campaign. We're selling wallpaper. We're selling anything. Now, at the moment, let's just pretend we've got a click-through rate of 8%. Great, you know, 8% of the entire audience going through. There's some relevance there. Next week, we've got 4%. Oh no, that's terrible, right? Is it? Or have we just added a layer of pre-qualification on our ads? Have we just now told users this is the price? This is more of a premium product. Therefore, you're getting less clicks, but the client's looking at it and thinking, oh no, we've got a lower click-through rate. Does that really matter? So it's boiling back to that education piece as well. We're saying, right, you've got to focus on these metrics, but do you actually understand what they really mean and why they're important to you? So I think this can even boil down to conversions too. When we assess conversions, so let's just say, for example, using Google Ads as a reference, again, we've got form submits, right? We've got form submits for various clients that we work with. But the thing is, where we're saying, great, I need a cost per acquisition of £50 and I need 1,000 form submits. But what do these form submits actually mean? You know, are these the right audiences? Typically, what's overlooked by a lot of clients are these qualitative factors. So, for example, like customer feedback or lead quality. So what we try to do is ensure that we've got actually as much integration for platforms like HubSpot, for instance. So what we can actually do is we can understand customer life cycles a little bit better, reference this back to the conversions that we're actually collecting. So they may say, great, you know, we've got our 1,000 conversions, but we may be able to reference through HubSpot that maybe only 10% of these are actually viable for the business. And therefore we can develop and we can attune kind of align our strategies in a certain way to be able to educate the client to be able to say, hey, this is not the right approach. We don't need this volume of conversions. Actually, what we need to do is we need to shrink the amount of money that you're putting into Google Ads, for example, put it into these specific areas because this is where the quality rests. And I think also it depends on channel, for instance. When you look at platforms, I know this is slightly outside of the realm of what we're talking about, but when we look at platforms such as like Pinterest, now Pinterest, Meta, Google, LinkedIn, they all have slightly different attribution windows. So Google, for instance, may have a 90-day. Pinterest, for instance, you know, we can go 7 days. Meta, we can have a 7-day click, 1-day view. So it's all about understanding a little bit more about what you're selling and therefore what you're looking at. If we're, for instance, trying to sell a product that takes, or a service that typically has a 90-day sale window, or, you know, conversion lag of 90 days, or maybe even 180 days or whatever, we're not really going to be able to get that attribution on Meta. So what we truly need to be looking at and educating our clients on is about engagement rate. So are people actually engaging with the website? Can we look through Google Analytics and say, hey, actually engagement rate based on this test that we've recently run on Meta has increased from 20% to 80%. These are the metrics that matter. It's not just about the top line metrics of conversions. It's all about what's behind the conversions and then equally what channel we're actually running on as well.
And I think that's a really key point as well that Gary's picked up on there about the meaning behind each of those metrics. Like conversions is an absolutely classic one where you talk to clients and they say, oh yeah, we got X conversions. And really when you dig into it, it's as a word, it is self-descriptive. You're converting someone from something into something else. And actually, if you're converting them from something that's not useful into something that's also not useful, there's no value in that transaction and measuring that metric. So it's for the client, you need to talk to them about these are the people that we're targeting. We're pre-qualifying them. We're doing other things. That's what they're converted from. And this is what we're converting them into. People who didn't know about our product into people who do now know about our product. People who are on our website into people who have bought from our website. And that can then fit into that wider understanding of the user journey because you've now got a group of people that you've converted into previous purchasers. What can you convert them into further down the line? And so it's that transition stage that we're really talking about when we say conversion. But very few clients really look beyond the word, that's a conversion, up means good, down means bad. It's really more in depth than that.
I think there is a last point, which is you've got to make sure you measure. That's obviously, that makes lots and lots of sense. Right? Let's make sure we measure it, right? But then make sure you understand what you're measuring. You know, it is really, really the underpinning thing that we're all talking about, right? First of all, I've got to understand what I'm measuring, right? And make sure I'm actually measuring it in the right way. And then at the end of it, what I've got to make sure of is that I understand what that actually meant. So if I have said that the ones that I come across quite a lot is we've got an MQL, so we've got a marketing qualified lead. All right, okay. And what does that mean? Okay, so we sit with it and we go, well, they filled out a form. All right, great. But what did they fill out on the form? I don't know. But you've counted it. So was it an MQL, or was it just a random person that happened to click on your site, that happened to fill out a form and clicked it? Okay. And then if they filled out that form, was that form relevant to what you actually wanted somebody to do? Right? And then did I measure it in a way that was actionable afterwards? So did it go to the right person? Did it go to the salesman that actually needs that form, right? So they can ring that person up and say, hi, you know, I've noticed you filled in a form within a timely fashion, right? Was there enough in that to actually make it what you wanted it to eventually become? So can I convert that to ultimately what is a sale? And if I can't, why was I measuring it in the first place? Right? Why was it geared up in that way? Why was that at the end of all of my calls to action? You know, if it doesn't fulfill its purpose, let's go back to the drawing board and let's find out what does. And then we can use that. And then when you pass that over to people like Gary, right? Gary can use that in his ad campaigns. He can feed that into programmatic and he can get you more, right? And then if you feed that into automation, Matt can work out how you've actually got what the data actually means and what the trends are and everything that goes along with that. And then you can feed that back into your SEO campaign and you can say, right, well, we need to be able to include this prompt or this nudge or this piece of copy to be able to generate more of that. But it all starts with, like, I've got to measure it. I've got to understand what I'm measuring. I've got to take hold of that at the end of it, and I've got to analyze it and have a look at it and say, right, what did it actually mean? And did it mean what I thought it meant at the beginning of this journey? And if it doesn't, let's feed it back in the loop and let's make sure we get to that point where it does mean something and it does mean something to the business.
Yeah, no, great points. And I think that's, yeah, I mean, we haven't got much time left, but that's something that maybe companies don't do enough of. And it kind of, a lot of presumptions are made and kind of just presuming things and like, oh, yeah, but just, yeah, no, it's great points. And this has been so valuable, even just for me. I've got homework to do because it's given me loads of ideas. So, yeah, I really appreciate that. And obviously, those who didn't catch it or catch it on a replay, thanks for that. And it obviously will be on YouTube, and I'll be sharing it around and stuff like that. So yeah, do check it out and share it with others who might find it interesting. So yeah, just finish off with saying thank you to you three. It's been a fascinating discussion. I've learned loads. I'm sure those who watch it will as well. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.